See, it has risen and collapsed a bit again. And so now we'll take the rubber band off. So we have nice risen Biga. I've got the milk here, and I also measure the honey in the same container. So you can see I got the honey in the bottom and the milk, and heat this up together for a little bit for 30 seconds to a minute in the microwave. You want the milk warmed up to look around 85 to 95, not more than 95 ideally. You can see here I'm at 89. That's great. Make sure the honey is stirred in before you measure the temperature, because it will heat up hotter than the milk does in the microwave. Take your flour, instant yeast, and dry blend it a little bit to get it nicely distributed throughout the flour. I use just a thin whisk. It's not about aerating or anything, it's just to get it thoroughly blended. And now we add in the warm milk and honey and mix that all in. I'm fussy, I like to get every drop with a spatula. And now I'm going to put this in the mixer with the paddle attachment. It's a trick I've learned in the beginning with these doughs. It mixes better, mixes quicker and better in the beginning with the paddle attachment on low speed. And we're not trying to develop a dough or anything at this point. We just want all of the flour to get wet so it can sit and hydrate for 20 minutes before we start kneading it into a dough. So I'm going to put that in the mixer and do that and show you when it's done in just a second. Here we are. Just combine it all till it's all nice and wet. Clear off the paddle. Cover it with plastic. Doesn't have to make contact with the dough. Just cover the bowl top with plastic so that there's no draft, so it doesn't skin over. And let it stand for 20 minutes. And this allows the gluten proteins to fully hydrate so that you can better develop gluten when you start kneading and mixing. Okay, so we've let it stand for 20 minutes. You can see it hasn't really risen much or anything. It's just about allowing the gluten to hydrate. Now, we're going to add in the salt. I'd like to sprinkle it around. And I'm going to add in the Biga. And so what we're going to do with the Biga is first get it out of the bowl, which with the bowl being sprayed with the pan release helps make it really easy to remove it. And you can smell the aroma, the nice fermented beer aroma that you get from a Biga sponge. And so we want to break it up into pieces. I like to break it into about 8 pieces. Okay, and throw these in there. and our fat. I'm using lard. You can use butter, but you do want to use a solid fat for this type of dough. Oil is not recommended. It makes the dough too soft. And so now we are using the dough hook, and we will go into the mixer and mix this for about 6 minutes. And you want to push it down in between if it starts to travel up the hook. So you want to mix the dough until you see it starts to clear the bowl. You'll see as it's kneading in the bowl, it doesn't stick to the bowl. And so now we're going to turn it out, and I like to spray a little spray, the pan release, and turn the dough out. See, and the whole dough comes out. There's almost nothing left in the bowl. And now we're going to, in a sense, fold it from the top down, from the bottom up, from the left, from the right, top down again, bottom up again. Keep doing this folding until it forms a nice tight ball. I'm going to put this in a large bowl to allow it to ferment the first time. So you should see it's nice and smooth on top. And let this ferment for 2 hours. And again, we're going to spray the bowl with the pan release. This makes it just really easy to get it out. And it sets a thin coating. It doesn't affect the dough at all. And again, a little bit on top, just so that the plastic won't stick. And so now I'm going to put it directly on top to ensure that it doesn't get dry. And I'm going to put this in a warm place to ferment for 2 hours. A warm place meaning somewhere between 80 to 100 degrees, no more than 100. Around 80 to 85 is ideal. Okay, so we'll see you back in 2 hours. Oh, just another thing is my dough, after mixing, is about 85. I guess you can't see that on the camera for whatever reason. Maybe I'll turn the light off. You can always edit this out. So around 84, 85. That's nice. I like to keep track of how warm my dough is to make sure it doesn't get too hot. But also just to make sure it's warm enough that it does ferment. The yeast likes to ferment at around 80 degrees. As you can see, after 2 hours, the dough has risen a lot. So because we sprayed, the plastic comes off easy, and we can remove it from the bowl. Very easily. So now we do the folding again. To the middle, to the middle, important is to get all the gas out and to get it so that it's a nice tight smooth package, right? Okay, and once again spray the bowl. And spray the dough. Cover it up. And now we go for 1 hour. Give it another proof. So this is after our first hour. And once again, we're going to punch it and fold it and give it one more final proof. That's mostly all about developing the gluten. So let me try and get this out of the bowl left-handed so you can see it a little bit better. See how nicely it just rolls right out when we have it nicely oiled. Okay. Now I have a pretty big batch here too, so this is 5 pounds of dough. So if you're wondering why it looks like so much, that's why. Because I'm making loaves as well as some buns. So punch all the gas out, and then again the folding. Top down, bottom up, overlapping. Left and right. That's why we call it punching the dough. Once again, going to spray the bowl. Whoops. Pop it in there. Spray it with a little bit of my mixer is leaking grease. And now we give it 1 more hour, and then we're going to be doing the final shaping. Okay, so here we have the dough after the final hour. You can see it has risen up again quite nicely. And I've got my pans all ready. I'm going to be doing a variety of different shapes here for you. And I'll just edit the video afterwards. So it isn't too boring. So we're going to take the dough out of the bowl once again and degas it. Degassing means we're going to punch it. Get your aggravation up. Now all of my equipment is in storage, so I'm making do with whatever types of forms and pans that we have been able to purchase. And so for my loaf, I'm going to make a large, wide loaf. So I'm using this takeout food container pan that we bought at the grocery store. So it's a little bit wider, and so that means instead of a 20-ounce loaf, I'm doing a 30-ounce loaf. So I'm doing 850 grams for that. So I'm going to take some dough off here, start with that, put it on the scale. Okay, 850 grams. I'm just going to move this out of the way for the moment. And so we're going to again get all the gas out, and again we're going to do this folding from the top down, from the bottom up, overlapping. I use my knuckles, right? Okay, and then fold in like that and in like that, and then once again to the middle, and then once again down over top. And we're just going to let that rest for a moment. I'm going to give that just a few minutes rest before we do one more shaping to make sure we have all the gas bubbles out and get a nice even loaf. It's part of the shaping procedure. And so I'm going to make some Kaisers, I'm going to make some club buns, and I'm going to make some little cloverleaf rolls. Right? So I'm going to start off with the cloverleaf rolls, which are really tiny. They are basically 3 little balls that go into the muffin tin, and we want them to be about 20 grams each. Six. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want to round them, nice smooth round balls. Put 3 in each muffin cup. So it's a matter of taking the dough, applying pressure, and cupping your hand so that essentially it creates a round, smooth ball with a seam on the bottom. So these are the here we have the Cloverleaf buns, light spray, cover with plastic, and these need to rise 45 minutes to an hour so that they're nice and double in volume, and they go into the oven at 375, and they'll take about 20 minutes. So now back to our loaf. We want to turn it upside down, punch it to get the gas out. And fold the two ends in a little bit, just like so. And now we're going to kind of roll it up like a jelly roll. So we take a little bit here and press that down. And as we roll it, we want to apply some tension. So it's building tension this way. And roll it some more. And if you have large hands like I have, you can just use your thumbs going across like this. And so now we have the nicely shaped loaf. And we can put that into our loaf pan. Make sure the seam is in the center. If the seam is not in the center, it'll roll one way or another as it rises, right? And so the same thing here then applies, is that we're just going to give it a a very light spray, and we're going to cover it with plastic so that it doesn't get any skin, doesn't dry out. And we're going to set that aside for about an hour to proof. If your room is colder, it takes a little longer. If your room is warmer, it may go slightly quicker. Warmer meaning if it's 90 degrees. Cooler meaning if it's like 70 or below. If your room temperature is 65, it might take an hour and 15 to an hour and a half. So now I'm going to do some club buns, and club buns is similar to the loafers. Basically, we're going to weigh them up, and then I'm going to round them, let them rest for a moment, and round them once more. And these are large rolls, so these are 120 grams. And a club bun is essentially the kind of bun that is used in a three-tier sandwich like a Big Mac, where you have a layer of bun in the middle. It's referred to as a club bun. And so to get the bun to rise up straight, we proof and bake them in these rings. And these are 4-inch rings so that we get a nice large bun that you could easily fit a nice hamburger patty or two, in other words, on it, or build yourself like a BLT with chicken or something like that. So I'm going to make 6 of those. So like the little rolls that we did, these need to be rounded so that there's a seam on the bottom. So essentially I'm just going to show you sort of a manual way in a sense, is that you want to get everything gathered up, always going to this seam that right now it's upside down, it would be the bottom, and that there is some tension to it all so that it's nice and smooth on top, right? And so we're going to set that aside. So it's the same idea as what we did with the little ones. The difference being is that because these are larger, I'm not going to cup my hand flat. I'm going to kind of reach claws almost. And so you see, like, it's, as I move it around, it's tucking those edges in so that it becomes a nice smooth ball like that. And with practice, you can then do 2 at a time. And so we're going to let these rest for a few minutes and round them once more and flatten them before we place them in the rings. So while those are resting, I'm going to cover them with a little bit of plastic too, just so that they don't get a skin. And now I'm going to weigh out the last of the dough for my Kaisers. And the Kaisers I want to make 100 grams each, which is about 3.5 ounces. Well, I'm going to make them slightly smaller. I'm going to make them 80 grams. Because I don't have enough dough. So same thing with the Kaisers. I'm going to round them first and set them aside to rest before I finish shaping them. So our club buns, round them up again just a little bit more to tighten them up and flatten them out. So that they're up almost the size of the ring. I'm gonna have to let that one rest a little bit. Round them up. So the dough should be evenly flattened out and fill the rings nicely. Once again, we're going to do a light spray and give them about an hour to proof under plastic. And lastly, going to shape the Kaisers. Lots of flour. Flatten it out. I also need lots of flour on the tray at this point. Actually, no. Cut that. For proofing the Kaisers, I'm going to use what is called a couche. It's essentially a cloth, cotton, or in this case linen. Linen naturally prevents any kind of mold growth or things like that, so it's easy to keep clean. And so I'm just going to dust this very generously with flour, because the Kaisers, for their shape, need to be proofed upside down, and then at 3/4 proof transferred to the baking surface, and or tray or peel, however you're getting them into the oven, and then baked. So flattening it out a bit. And then it's a folding process, and make sure to have some flour on there so that the folds will stay visible after proofing and baking. So hold a thumb or a finger in and fold over, and then karate chop it, and then fold over to the middle and karate chop. So it's 2 folds, 3 folds, karate chop, 4 folds, karate chop, and the 5th one tucked in there, so that it forms a rose-like pattern, or what looks like the crown of a Kaiser, or a czar, if you will. And so this is then placed upside down onto the couche for proofing. So these get covered up in the couche and left to proof for about 45 minutes and then taken off and put right side up onto the baking pan, or if you were using a peel to bake them on the hearth, you would put them on the peel to get ready for loading in the oven. So we'll be back when we're ready to load. Okay, for the buns, the little cloverleaf buns that are ready now, I'm going to make some egg wash. So I'm going to take 1 egg and I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of milk. And I'm going to whisk this together, and this is going to be my egg wash to brush on top to give it the buns a nice color and gloss. I should have picked a bigger container. Trying to get all that egg white broken up. And I have my oven preheated at 375. There we go. And I have a pastry brush. And here now you can see the buns have risen. And we can take the plastic off. And now we can just lightly brush these with the egg wash. We don't want it to pool too much because we don't want scrambled eggs with milk on the buns. It's just a light glazing, if you will, so that it gets color and sheen. And these are small. These will take about 15 to 20 minutes. So I always set the timer a little short. You can always leave them a little bit longer. When they're black, they're done. And so you see it's gently brushing because it just needs to make contact with the brush and it flows off the brush onto the product. And now these can go in the oven and get baked. I like to egg wash the club buns as well. They're almost ready. So I'm going to pull the plastic off and egg wash them while my other pull apart cloverleaf buns are baking. And if you wanted to put sesame seeds on, you would sprinkle them on after putting the egg wash on. I do not have any here, so I'm doing it without. I'm just putting the egg wash for color. And you can see how they fill the rings nicely, and that gives them nice straight sides so that it's easy to split them into 3 afterwards. And you'll notice 4 of my rings are metal crimped rings, and these two in the middle I made myself out of tin foil, and works pretty good. And so by the time the other buns come out of the oven, these will be ready to go in. So the Kaisers have had a good 45 minutes. We can see they've started to rise a little bit, right? And so now I'm just going to slide this whole thing off of the tray gently. And then I can open this up, and we can lift the Kaisers up and put them right side up onto the baking pan. And these I will not egg wash. I will wash them just with water to help them split open nicely. I'm going to see if I can show you the cook temperature of the rolls immediately as they come out of the oven. With dinner rolls, it's usually pretty safe to bake to color, but if you have them all grouped together in a cluster on a pan, then you want to make sure the ones in the center are baked all the way through. I like to use an instant read thermometer, stick it right in so that it's in the middle, give it a moment, check the reading. We're at 202, 203, so we are definitely safe. We are cooked all the way through. We want to get to at least 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And so with the muffin pan ones, we just have to turn them out and let them cool on the screen. You do not want to let them cool in the pan. They will sweat in the pan and become soggy, and it will help introduce mold growth. And so now they need to cool thoroughly, usually about an hour before you can package them for storage. So as you can see, we got a nice golden color, and now while they're warm, we want to remove the buns from the rings, and you can see they have that nice height to it, so that'll make it easy to split them when they're nice and cooled for making sandwiches, nice club sandwiches. Right? So I'm using the tongs to make sure I don't burn myself. And of course, these little aluminum rings come off a little, don't stay down on the tray as easily. And so here again, like with the other buns out of the muffin tin, we want to remove them from the rings in the pan so they don't sweat, and let them cool nicely before we bag them or slice them or things like that. The loaf has proofed up nicely, and I'm just going to get it ready for baking while the Kaisers are in the oven. And one of the things here that I like to do is a sort of a little trick from the lab is in commercial baking, big commercial bakeries, when you want to split on top, there isn't somebody standing there cutting it or things like that. And at home, maybe you don't have a sharp knife or a razor blade, or you just feel uncomfortable trying to slash it without collapsing it. Well, a simple trick is to soak a piece of string in some water, and that water will create a weak spot. In a commercial situation, there's actually a thin water jet that goes across to create that weak spot. So all we do is lay the string right on top here gently, and the loaf is going to split where that string is now and give us a nice split on the crust. So here are my Kaisers. One thing we can see is that I need practice. This is the one that turned out the closest to what they should look like, with the rose kind of pattern. Still need some practice. Getting better at it though, more consistent. And once again, want to take these off of the hot pan onto a screen so that they can cool. And you can also notice in terms of the color difference, without the egg wash, they don't get as much color, and of course there's the flour dust on there and they're not as shiny. You can see the puppy is waiting for his samples too. Right? Yeah. Anyway, you can see the string gives us a nice split and comes off nice and easy after baking, and you can reuse it over and over again. And I am going to check my internal temperature to make sure I've hit 200 so that I know it's cooked all the way through into the center. And I'm just a little, are we there? No, see, I need another few more. I'm only at 180 and I really want to make sure it's cooked all the way through. This is for food safety as well as ensuring all the starches are unlocked, otherwise it will collapse as it cools. So we're going back in for a couple more minutes. So I've given it more time, and now I'm going to check the temperature again. Doing much better, 92, 193.
But otherwise all we have is in a business set of shortcuts. The prosecutor's office worked hard dredging channels far and wide. But no one...
Still not quite. Couple more minutes yet. I'm only at 195.
Our only theory of Miss Ware, who after having already made the tragic mistake of blaming a man who was innocent, a man who took his own life, instead of limiting her fury for justice, has arbitrarily decided to find another guilty party, investigating one way with the blinders of prejudice.
Okay, so we finally hit 200, 202 to be exact, 202.1.6 it was a second ago. So now we're cooked all the way through. And again, we want to turn the loaf out of the pan for cooling so it does not sweat. And we need to let that cool for a solid hour before we can bag it up. And tomorrow I'll get some cross sections of the club buns for you.